Hi from me, JB. Welcome to the new year, 2022, our first podcast of the year.
And welcome from me, Dr. Daniela.
Today, for the very first time, the two of us are recording together. I'm here in Canada in the studio with Dr. Daniela, and it's so fun to do it together for the first time.
And you can actually watch a video recording of our podcast on YouTube on WellnessMD's channel.
And you can also actually watch it on Facebook podcast. Today, we are talking about mindful living. This will be an important theme going into 2022. Mindful living is all about living with awareness in the present moment.
JB, you nailed it. Mindful living involves being conscious of the world we live in and the impact of our daily decisions on ourselves, on our families, our society, and the bigger environment. Choosing to live a mindful life is an active decision. It's a conscious effort to disconnect ourselves from the rat race and to take time and that mental energy to identify our values and then align our choices to prioritize those values. It combines seemingly tiny changes in our daily lives, which adds up to significant changes in our lifestyle over time.
One of the most noticeable factors when you start living more mindfully is a change in consumption habits. As soon as you begin to practice mindful living, you'll be more aware of how and with whom you spend your time, what you eat, what you consider essential, and how it affects your overall health and well-being. You may start to shift away from the material consumption of goods and choose to consume more moments and life experiences instead. And we see this with the younger generations like Gen Z. They opt to spend more of their money, a higher percentage of their disposable income on experiences rather than material goods. And there are many different ways in which one can practice mindful living. In today's podcast, we're going to discuss 10 different ways in which we can practice mindful living. Daniela, I've started reading about cognitive diffusion. Will you tell us more about that?
So cognitive diffusion means to view a thought for what it is, instead of giving your thoughts too much weight, to recognize when thoughts run through your mind, that it's something external, that it's not you, not to hold on to that thought and to identify with the thought, but to recognize it as a thought that's just passing. And that carries the same weight for emotions, anxiety, anger, to recognize the emotion and to acknowledge it rather than to identify with it and to say that I am mad. You can say, oh, I have an angry thought about something, and to be aware of that. Your mind has this unique ability to create inner dialogue. It wants to solve problems, it remembers past experiences, and it plans for your future. All these abilities enable you to endure and even to thrive in the face of life's many challenges. And any threats that you have to survival, these things protect you. However, it can also negatively impact you because your mind is often prone to many unhelpful thought patterns, such as excessive worry about the future or rumination. Rumination means when you stew about the past, when you relive past experiences, and reliving those past experiences doesn't necessarily enable you to make better choices. Those are often unhelpful thoughts, and it can lead to emotional suffering. It can interfere with planning, with decision-making, and with effective action. So you might, for example, criticize yourself for past mistakes. But frequent self-criticism is very likely to lead to continuous negative thoughts where you start spiraling down those negative thoughts, and that can lead to depression. It leads to unhelpful coping behaviors like emotional eating or codependence or substance use or excessive risk avoidance due to the fear of failure or rejection. So what cognitive diffusion does is it helps you by lessening the influence of these unhelpful thoughts and feelings, to recognize this is not me. This is a thought. It's not me. It's a feeling. And then once you recognize it, you can learn to view it as it is. It's just a thought. It's not a fact. It's not reality. It's a thought that comes and goes. That creates the opportunity to choose your responses mindfully and purposefully based on your core values. And you can then decide what is best for your day, what is best for your future, and choose your thoughts accordingly.
I love that. I'm no mental health expert, but as we've been living through COVID and mental health is so much more on the forefront, mindful living and being aware of our thoughts, not ruminating, sounds like a wonderful way to ensure that we stay healthy mentally.
Oh, definitely, definitely. And we've chatted about meditation before, but then cognitive diffusion it's a way to improve mental health. But then with meditation, we can teach ourselves cognitive diffusion. So what meditation essentially is it gives you that space at certain times where you can just sit down and focus on something else, for example, your breath. And then you'll start noticing thoughts running past. And as you're noticing these thoughts, you come into the habit of realizing how your mind is just running, and it's full of thoughts. It's like this highway with lots of cars just going. And it gives you that space to become aware of all this thinking. And that really paves the way for you to, at other points when you're not meditating, to understand that these are just thoughts, that's just racing. It understands what cognitive diffusion is. It's not really getting rid of those thoughts, but it's recognizing it. And with cognitive diffusion, we don't try to get rid of it. We don't want to control the thoughts. We don't even want to label these thoughts saying that it's bad or I should not be thinking. You're just noticing your thoughts as they arise, and you see them for what they are, and then you let go of them. Same way as a car on a highway that you see coming, you notice it's a black car, and then it goes again. So next time when you catch yourself in a thinking trap, try treating your thoughts as background noise, as highway cars, and then you continue to focus on what you are doing.
I love that. I've started doing that, practicing that, and that's definitely one of the ways in which I'm going to practice mindful living in 2022. The second way in which we can practice mindful living is through being clear about and then keeping our values in mind.
Now, that's a big thing. That's something you taught me, is how to become aware of values, how to find your values. Will you share that with our listeners?
Absolutely. There's an exercise that I can share, but it's really about going through all the different values out there. And there's not a set list, different tools have different values, but then identifying what your core 6 and then ultimately your core 3 values are. That is really important.
So give us examples of values. What are values?
No, so for me, my 3 core values is faith, family, and growth. My husband, one of his 3 core values is fun. Now, growing up, I like having fun. I'm always one up for fun and skiing and snowboarding. And yesterday we were bargaining in the snow. I didn't want to stop. It was -5 degrees, but I just wanted to continue doing it. So I love fun, but it's never been one of my core values. Whereas my husband, and actually a lot of my colleagues, when I do this at work, have fun as one of their 3 core values. But now I'm aware that that is one of his core values. And as we design our life, I realize that that's important to him, but for me, it's growth. Now, when I don't feel like I'm improving my life, I get miserable because that's just a core value of mine. Now, I feel like I've got enough degrees. I'm not going to study anything else formally, but in other ways, I always need to ensure that I grow. So for example, if I watch, I'm not a big TV watcher, but if I watch a lot of series on Netflix at night, I don't feel great about myself at all because I want to feel like I'm improving and I'm growing. But now I'm aware of that and I'm aware of his, and I can manage our lives accordingly. So that's just an example from my own life. And maybe I'll add another one, family. If you asked me 10 years ago, family would have not been on there, as I was very career driven and I had and your values can absolutely change over time. It usually doesn't change annually, but over a period of time. But now my family is critical. I travel a lot for work, but now I think instead of traveling 4 nights a week, I might only travel every 2 weeks, because family is a core value and I still do want to spend some time with my son. So that is some of those examples.
And there's actually books and apps, right, that you can look onto to help you find your values.
Absolutely. And we will include some of that in the link that's going out.
Yes, you can have a look afterwards at www.wellnessmdhealth.com. And on there will be a link with a way that you can try to find your own core values. And that's really helpful, as you said, for me as well. It makes me understand myself better. It helps me to understand my kids better once I discern their values. So that's quite helpful.
And then you can align your life accordingly. So once you know what's more important to you, the most important to you, whether it's your family, your work, your religion, self-care, education, growth, community, the environment, once you know what you value most, you can try to positively enforce those areas by being more caring, disciplined, supportive, fun-loving, patient, persistent, courageous, whatever those values are that are important to you. And in most cases, when you decide to live more mindfully, you will find that your values will include spending time with friends and family and enjoying the outdoors, while focusing less on consumption of material possessions. And in our previous podcast, I suggested revisiting your resolutions on the 1st of every month. And you could add revisiting your values on the 1st of every month. I know on mine they actually written very big in my office, but that's just a good idea. It just anchors you and centers you as you think about mindful living. And then many of the other things you're trying to do in your life become noise. You realize it's okay to let them go, because you are focusing on these values that are critical to you or your spouse and your children.
Oh, that's so powerful. One of the things we have found during COVID is it's important for us to eat together as a family. But 3 children, and they're doing different activities. I'm a chair for a board of directors, so I often have meetings at night. My husband has a very demanding career as well. So we found that we kind of thought that we can't spend as many meals together because the kids have hockey and skating. And with COVID, the first thing to stop was all the children's activities. And that made us aware of the value of eating all our meals together. And especially when our kids had to do online schooling, and they're going to do online schooling now, then you actually have the benefit of having breakfast and lunch together as well. It really gives you that opportunity to put mindfulness into your meals as well, to become really aware of what you're eating, the smell, the taste, the food you're putting in your body. Stressful jobs often make it impossible it makes us think it is impossible to have good eating habits. And a lot of us really, I'm often very resistant to cooking meals, because for me, it's such a chore. It's not something I look forward to. But if you see it in such a way, if you're more attentive, more mindful about it, and I see that everything that I'm putting into my children's bodies are either building them up or breaking them down. The food becomes part of us, part of our DNA. It really sets them up for success more than a fancy private school would set them up for success. Is their health. What I feed them now really determine how healthy they will be in their 40s and 50s. And once I really understood that concept, it helped me to put more energy and passion and love into cooking and planning. So for me, it's important to be intentional about wanting to feed my family healthy. That helps me to put more time into planning it, to make sure that I have all the veggies and products in the house. And then because I'm planning my meals, we can eat more healthily. I can put a protein with a sauce and veggies in the morning in the crock pot. And when I come home after work, our dinner is ready. So that really sets us up for success. And then there's no rushing, making food with hungry children. Everyone can just be calm at the table. We can have that whole hour. We would just sit and eat, where we don't have to run around and prep the meal, because the meal has been thought. I've put in all the thinking and planning in the meal before. So that is a big thing for me, is mindful eating, teaching my kids to mindfully eat so that they're aware of all the taste, to really just, we have our own herb garden so that they can smell all the flavors, add it to the food as they wish, and to teach mindful eating to them as well, so that they really see it as a way that they nourish their bodies, and they see it's important for us. It's a combination of things, right? It's mindful eating, it's prioritizing the family. It's my husband prioritizes it as well. He is very disciplined, even though he's working from home, to leave his work completely 5 o'clock, spend time with his family, and then he'll return to work after the children's bedtime.
I want to add to that is, I love what you said in terms of mindful eating. I mean, I was notorious for eating at my desk most of my life, and like eating so fast that I've had people comment on how fast I ate in the past. And now it's so important to me to eat mindfully as well. Not just gulping the food down, but looking at it, tasting it, chewing it, like chewing your food properly really help with digestion and going back to the mindful living. So it's just eating slowly. And usually, once we're done eating, my husband wants to jump up and start, cleaning the table. I'm just like, let's just sit and enjoy it a little bit more. That really helps me to be in the moment and to be present. And as we're talking about being present in the moment, another thing as we think about mindful living in this year is improving our postures and being present and in the moment. And I need to be reminded of this all the time. I know Mom was also, when I use the word notorious again, for saying, hey, you're slouching, go stand against the wall.
Or remember when we practiced piano, because we would practice piano for hours, and my mom would just walk past and kind of tickle my back just to remind me to have a proper upright piano posture.
Absolutely. And that is something that's why, with the benefit of family, because not many other people are going to tell you you're slouching. But while we've been together this past week on vacation, Daniela said to me more than once, hey, go stand against the wall. I can't believe how you're slouching. But improving our posture and being present in the moment is really critical. It helps with breathing, because we need to take proper breaths and get enough oxygen. And then you
stimulate your vagus nerve. When you're taking those deep breaths, you open up your diaphragm, you stimulate your vagus nerve. By stimulating your vagus nerve, you're stimulating your parasympathetic system, and about that we can have a whole podcast. But when you're all stressed out, your sympathetic nervous system gets wired, and you're in a flight and fight response easily. When you take deep breaths, you counter that with your parasympathetic nervous system, and it calms you.
And one of the ways you can determine whether you have a good posture is, do you look at the ground when you are walking outside? To experience mindful living, you need to change direction. Are you looking down or are you looking up? When you're going for a walk, stop for a moment, look up at the sky, look at the trees, look at the leaves, notice birds flying by, the sounds around you, what you smell, what you feel. Straighten that body. And once again, it's just so critical for breath, because I know when I get anxious and a little stressed, overwhelmed, my breath I just start slouching and not breathing in deep. So this upright posture is really important in order to open us up to experience the beauty that life has to offer.
Another way in which we can practice mindful living is to listen to others and recognize how we communicate. So both of us have learned quite a bit about this, you in coaching and me in being a family physician. It's not something that we are born with. Both of us, because we're such fast-paced people, when someone is speaking, it's so natural to already be thinking, of an answer as a doctor. If someone comes in and say, oh, I have symptom ABC, then my knee-jerk reflex is to say, okay, but the treatment is XYZ. So this is one of the most important skills that I had to learn. And it's a continuous process. It's not something that I learned at a course and now know it. It's something that I have to practice every day. And that's active listening. To be so mindful when I'm with a patient in a consulting room, to, in my mind, to shut down other noise, not to be planning dinner, not to be thinking of my previous patient or my next patient, to just be here in the moment, to be present for the person that I'm with. We can listen better to really focus on this person or my child or my husband, whoever I'm talking to in the moment. Because all of us know how fast our minds can race. And that's one of the things that this cognitive diffusion is helping us with when we practice it often, and meditation help us to really quiet our mind. And then when someone is speaking to you, rather than coming up with the right words to respond with, you can just focus on hearing their words, listening to them. And something that is helpful for me as a physician is afterwards to repeat back to the person. If someone told me ABC, to take a moment and say, okay, I hear you are thinking or saying ABC. It gives that person time to respond and say, oh no, you heard wrong, you understood wrong, because I hear things through my lenses and my past experiences and my preconceived prejudices. So it helps really, or if your child is saying something to you, I'm mad and I don't want to eat this, to repeat that afterwards. It sounds to me as if you are mad and that you don't want to eat these foods, and why. It helps your child to reflect. It helps you to reflect when you say things back, and to really understand if you heard correctly the first time.
Yeah, I'm going to make a point of that in 2022 for sure.
And then also in periods of stress or heightened emotions, you have a 3-year-old, my youngest is 4. Quite often when they get frustrated, you have these heightened emotions, then we tend to communicate poorly. And we see it with our kids, how they, even when they can speak full sentences and can communicate better, when they get frustrated or a very strong emotion, how hard it is for them to communicate. But the same happens to us as adults. How do we react when we don't like what someone is saying? Do we stray away from mindful living when we just respond, when it's just a knee-jerk reflex? We can really, when we live mindful, we can become aware of how we communicate in tense situations. Sometimes we also give a sharp response, when we are tired or if we're in a state of panic, we often overreact. But you can get better at it. If I just see in my life how I got better, with every child, how I got better, when my first child would throw a tantrum, how upset I would get. And now by the third child, when the child throws a tantrum, I can say it's cool and calm on the inside and think, okay, so how should I respond? What is age appropriate for this child? And then my child can also hear that I'm more mindful. My child can hear at my tone and then realize that I'm feeling in control, that I'm not, everything in my brain is not turning red like hers. And that's really been helpful for me in parenting. It's been helpful for me as a physician. Patients are often scared in hospital when I see them. And emotions can easily escalate, but they really appreciate it when I'm able to stay calm and centered and focused, and I'm able to listen to them very intentionally.
And I think this is a journey, as we always say, step at a time, because I feel sometimes it's 5 steps forward, 6 steps back, where it's just continuously, as we are mindful, being aware of how we communicate, especially with everyone, but also our loved ones, because we want to build up as we communicate, and being mindful and aware aid with that. And then the next tip we have, practical way in which we can practice mindful living, is by changing our habits. And the specific habit that we are talking about is media habits. And you've heard me speak about this before, but it's asking ourselves whether our habits are good habits or bad habits, and whether our media consumption habits work for us. I studied I have a degree in communication and one in journalism, and what we consume impacts us on a subconscious level. That's a cold, hard fact. And not everyone has necessarily studied that science. And you just consume media and then you feel the way you feel. Don't realize that we are impacted severely by that. And this content we consume daily through media resources literally shape how we view the world. If you watch drama shows all the time, you might inject some of the drama into your relationships unnecessarily. But one that I'm more worried about is constantly watching the news. I know so many people, like, I can't obviously mention names in this podcast, but individuals that I know, because they tell me how they watch this and this and that, always aggressive, always under stress, really not in a good state. But I know they'll consume a ton of news. And that might lead you to judge others harshly and just feeling negative all the time. So it's crucial, firstly, to be aware of it, but to try and consume positive media content every chance you get. And whether it's positive media content or whether it's positive content, you will just find that you become more compassionate, kinder towards yourself and others, while thinking more positively about the world we live in. And I just want to add here, I've spoken about media consumption quite a bit, but not being on social media or technology the last thing in the morning and then again the first thing in the morning, because what do you think goes around in your mind all night?
Last thing at night.
The last thoughts you had. So we need to be deliberate about it. Don't let outside forces dictate your subconscious dialogue that becomes your conscious dialogue. I try first thing in the morning, I always try to think, whether it's being thankful for 3 things, saying a positive mantra. I'm very deliberate about it, because once you get up, you get bombarded with external stimuli. Don't switch on the news the first thing in the morning. It's the worst thing you can do.
Or look at your cell phone. That's something that I've had to learn for myself, to really be strict and not look at my cell phone work emails for that 2 hours before I go to bed, or the first hour in the morning. I found that really made a big difference in my life. Something that you mentioned about the news, or even watching a movie, when we do watch something stressful, our body has a hard time distinguishing between a real situation or just watching a movie. So they've done studies where they've shown people inside a cinema watching a thriller movie would be secreting adrenaline and cortisol the same way as someone who would be physically in a stressful situation like that. So for your body, it's so hard to distinguish whether something is a real threat or perceived threat. Then luckily the movie is over in 2 hours and you can go on your happy way, and you only secreted stress hormones for 2 hours and not for 24 hours, as if you're in a war situation. But still, for me and my lifestyle, those 2 hours of secreting stress hormones are too much. For me, it is better. And maybe it's because I'm a physician and I see stressful things, that really happens. But then I found in my life, in my spare time, I shouldn't be secreting all that adrenaline and cortisol. I should be doing things that get rid of adrenaline and cortisol.
And just being aware of that, I think, is the starting point for us as we're going into this new year.
And that's where this meditation comes in, is to still your mind. If you did watch too much news during the day and you sit and meditate that night, then you'll be aware of these thoughts running through your head. And with time, you'll notice a pattern in your own body and say, oh, you know what, I'm in a good space. What did I do today? Oh, I'm not in a good space. Why am I not in a good space? Meditation is really, it helps your mind not to race at 200 kilometers an hour. It's teaching your brain to become calm and to focus on one thing at a time. It also stops your thoughts when you do start in a negative spiral or an anxious spiral. It helps to stop and to anchor yourself. If you are having a hard time to anchor yourself, I teach most of my patients to then replace that with a positive mantra, because it's hard to just think of nothing when you're meditating. So rather than thinking of nothing, you can focus on your breathing, or you can replace it with a mantra, or you like positive affirmations, right? And then anything like a Bible verse or a prayer or an image, or just focusing on your breathing really help your mind to be focused and calm.
Absolutely. It's so critical. Continuous journey once again, but I've had the past few days, grace and peace, grace and peace. And as I go to bed at night, literally I focus on those two words, grace and peace. And then when I wake up, and then another way in which we can practice mindful living is by really appreciating and noticing those people in our lives, all people in our lives. And this is a hard one, especially the way the world is evolving with social media and basically with social media, is to try and not compare ourselves and our families with other families and other family situations. And our goal should not be to be better than those around us. Instead, we should focus on being better than we were yesterday or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I don't want to overemphasize social media, but I have this one friend that we have a history together. And on social media, other people actually, when we speak about her, we speak about her glamorous life just because of the way she travels and so forth. And then I saw her and she's so depressed, just like actually not going through a good time. But when I look at her social media, I struggle to not be a little jealous because it looks so amazing. But then that's not the reality. And that's just a little bit of a picture of social media at large. So just being aware of that, not to compare ourselves with others, because firstly, we don't have the full picture, but compare ourselves with where we've been. When I look back, my life 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years, I feel really good about myself. Then when I start looking at some of my peers or my son's parents, and I'm like, oh gosh, I didn't even get to take family photos until January and make a Christmas card because I just did not have the time. And every day we should spend time, like the Dalai Lama said, praising someone. And we can do this by telling a friend how amazing they are, or by praising a co-worker's talents. And this is not about being inauthentic. This is about when we see something beautiful or positive about someone, saying it. Like I've spent time with my sister Daniela here, and I just love how beautiful she's made her home. And I've said it to her, but I want to say to her again, because that's honest and it's real and it's authentic. But sharing that praise with somebody when
and
you
I
feel
appreciate it, because specifically something like this, I know I'm no interior decorator. So there is something that appreciate my efforts, and my kids and husband doesn't necessarily understand why there are so many plants in my house.
It's beautiful.
So if you appreciate it, it means the world to me.
And in a previous podcast, I spoke about the concept of say it now.
Yes.
And what that is about is identifying people in your life, those close to you, absolutely. Then that mid-tier people, that friends that you haven't, like I moved a lot, that I had 10 years ago in a city I lived, or college friends from South Africa. But then also those people that you just interact with a little bit, a neighbor you've had in the past, a teacher or a coach you had in the past, and connecting with them and expressing appreciation and kindness and gratitude towards them, and just doing that on a continuous basis, because it improves the lives of those people that we're expressing gratitude towards, but it also improves our own lives when we do something nice to others. But so just showing appreciation to others, you will notice that your life becomes more positive.
Yeah, and there is actually science behind that, where they've done studies, looking at people when you show gratitude, how it makes you more grateful. So as you start showing more gratitude, you do become more grateful. And as you become more grateful, your own quality of life actually improve. Something that I've really learned over the past 2 years is to accept that certain things are outside of my control and to let it be. And I found that that has given me really peace. And if I compare with some of my colleagues and friends who would constantly, I mean, we heard now again that the schools are not starting back and the kids have to do online schooling. And for me to fuss about that or to wonder, who's making these rules, on which premises, to spend a lot of energy on that is not helpful for me or my family, because that's something out of my control. And that's what you mentioned about the news as well. For me, following COVID numbers in the world is not helpful. I look at the amount of patients with COVID disease that's been admitted to my hospital. Every morning I get an email. Before I go to work, I see how many patients are in our ICU. That's the only numbers I need to see. I don't need to see what's happening in the rest of the world. It's not helpful to me. It's outside of my control. And then there's COVID is an easy example, but there are so many other things that you'll start to identify as you start living more mindful. You'll notice these thoughts, realize that it is something out of your control, and then you can just let it go because it is not in your control. And it's so important to remember, even if you can't control things that happen to you, you can control how you react to it. When things are going well, you can put out as much good into this world as you can. You can make life easier and you can make life better for those who are struggling. But when things are not going well for you, you can allow them to happen with minimal resistance, because this is outside of you. Sometimes bad things do happen, but we shouldn't allow those bad things to destroy us on the inside. We can choose to be better and stronger and more resilient after.
Absolutely. And sometimes some of these bad things lead to positive things in the long run. But even so, not over ruminate or spend too much time figuring it out. Take it in and moving ahead in life. I feel like I've built that muscle. I've flexed that muscle over the years of accepting the things that are outside of my control. Now we are getting to our final practical tip, how we can live mindfully in 2022. And I've really enjoyed this conversation. And that is to pause and reflect.
It is, I know our listeners will really enjoy this part from the feedback that we've been getting. This is something that we've touched on in previous podcasts, but a very good way to pause and reflect is to journal. That's something we learned from our dad, who's quite good with journaling. And I know my mother's mom was quite good with journaling, so that's something we grew up with. But as we started understanding the science behind journaling, we made sure that we make it a more active practice in our lives. But journaling at the end of the day gives you that opportunity to pause, to reflect. How did you spend your day? Have you made a positive impact or a negative impact on people around you? For some of my patients who have a hard time with journaling, I often tell them to just rate the day, just write a number to it. I find that very helpful in people with depression who would just say, life is miserable, I'm depressed. And then we might be starting lifestyle changes or dietary changes or medication. And when they come back, they'll say, oh, I'm still miserable and depressed. But then if they maybe stop that lifestyle change, they say, oh, I'm even worse than I was. So a way that you can objectively see how your day is to rate a number to it. So if 10 is an awesome day and 0 is a horrible day, if you put a number at the end of the day, and later I hope that would get to more words, but if you just start with a number, that gives you that opportunity to reflect and to say, you know what, after I started practicing mindfulness and after I started moving more, after I started walking through the woods every day for half an hour, my 5s started going to a 6, started going to a 7. So even though I'm feeling still depressed, there has been some improvement. So that's a very good way to look back and to just pause, to reflect what is working for you, what's not working, what's giving you joy. And then you can change your life accordingly to put more things that put joy into your life. I know physical activity gives me joy.
Absolutely.
So I make a conscious decision when I plan our weekends, when I plan our days, to plan a bike ride or a walk in the woods. Even though I feel that we don't have time for it, I know that increase my joy. It increase my quality of life. So even if I don't have energy, that's something that I do. And the only way I know that is because I would reflect at the end of the day.
I love that, because that's one thing you taught me. Even though I love riding, you go through phases in your life where you just don't have the capacity, emotional capacity at the end of the day. And you taught me that when I was still living in Chicago, just give yourself a rating for the day. And something else I can recommend is you get a 5-year journal. And
That's a good one.
It's just literally, it's 5 little lines, and you can just write down, ran this morning, had a average day at work, whatever it is, no time for dinner with the family, whatever, just a few thoughts, and then give yourself a rating. So that takes no more than 1 to 2 minutes. But then when you look back, you can go and see, oh, there's a pattern. I actually did love this phase of my life. I was happier when I exercised, as Daniela said.
And it helps us to process. When I have a conflict situation at work, I'm very careful not to respond right away, but to go home first and to journal. A way that I often process things is when I run, when I go for a run, and when I jog. But then also when I come back and I write down these things, I can write, what did that person say? What do I feel? What do I think? And then I can go into the third person and say, but what is that person? What is that person experiencing? Where is that person coming from? And that really helps me to look more objectively at what happened. It takes any conflict situation to the next level when you can write down that person's perspective as well.
Yeah, that's a wonderful one, pausing and reflecting. And I do have to mention technology here as well. It's just making time, whether it's during dinner time, whenever it is, not just pick up the phone, but rather think, what's going on? How am I feeling? Am I in the moment? Am I experiencing positive or negative emotions? That's something I'm consciously working on continuously. And then I'd love to start summarizing. We've had a wonderful discussion today. It's definitely way more fun in person, and the time flies. This will probably be our longest podcast to date. But I'd love to summarize the practical ways in which we can live a mindful life, as we discussed today. We started with ideas as to how we can practice cognitive diffusion, where we see our thoughts for what they are and not give them too much weight. We should remind ourselves of our values so that we see life in perspective. I think you wanted to add some thoughts.
It is, and also to understand the value, of practicing this mindfulness. It's easy to understand if you think about when you teach your kids to play piano, or when you teach them to ice skate or ski. They don't get it right away, but you don't stop because they can't do it. You keep trying and you keep trying, and they might really be doing very poorly at it for a year or two, but then you don't say, oh, let's stop playing the piano because you're not good. And the same practice applies to mindfulness. You're not going to say, oh, I'm no good at this, or I just react easily. You're going to continue practicing and practicing, and like playing piano or riding your bike, it's going to get easier over the years. And then the same practice applies with my children. If I look at when the first one had skating lessons, it was all new. But then the second child grew up next to the skating rink, and so did the third child. So by the time they got onto skates, it was so easy because they've seen the older ones mirror whatever it was on the soccer field, skiing, horse riding, whatever it is, they've had exposure to. So it was easier for them. And I found the same thing with mindfulness. You can identify people who you know that can act as mentors to you so that you have that exposure, so that you really surround yourself by people who are known for not to be reacting. And it's so easy to identify who on social media just lash out and get angry and get upset. But to identify people who do live mindful, who encompass traits and values which you would like to mirror. And then you can surround yourself with those people who live lives filled with grace and peace. So you were talking about the cognitive diffusion, our values, how to identify that. And you can have a look on our website at www.wellnessmdhealth.com for tools to determine your own values. Then a way to easily practice mindfulness is with your next meal, to make sure that you use all your senses. How does this food smell? What's the texture? How does it make me feel? You were talking about posture, just to be aware of where you are in the world, your proprioception, the way we communicate with active listening.
Absolutely. Adding to that, the media consumption habits, being aware of it and being thoughtful and deliberate, not just switching it on. And then introducing meditation, as that is a key practice in mindful living. And so is appreciating others. And then the last practical tip we discuss is we should learn to accept that which is out of our control and pause and reflect throughout our day. And my challenge to you is start today by making some minor changes in your life. You can do acts of kindness, you can let go of pain, show appreciation to others, or meditate and unlearn old habits and realize that it takes time and effort to incorporate new ones, and be gentle and kind to yourself, but continuously working on that.
It was wonderful to spend time with you today. My hope is that you will take away one or two of these ways to practice mindful living, and that it will enhance your life and help you to become healthier and happier.
Thank you for spending time with us today. Let us know how you are practicing mindful living and which of these practices have the biggest impact on your life. If you found this podcast helpful, please rate it and share it with a friend that would find it helpful too. Follow us on WellnessMDhealth.com or JB Ryan on Instagram. Until next time, take care.
Be happy and healthy until we meet again. Take care.